Hi, I'm Amy Corver, and I'm the Education Coordinator at Cascade, and today we're going to be doing an Intro to Commuting presentation. Now, normally this is a presentation where we can talk back and forth, but since we're in a pandemic right now and we're doing everything online, we're going to be doing it online. So if you have any questions or anything was confusing, you can totally feel free to email me at amyk@cascade.org, and we can have more of a conversation. But for now, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen a moment. Here we go. So intro to commuting, I'm assuming if you're here joining us that you're actually interested in commuting, or at least biking, how to become more confident in traffic or on the trails. So that's what we're going to go over today. So let's start with why. Why do you want to commute? Why? I'll start with why I started commuting. I rode bikes my whole life when I was young, but I lived out on a farm, so commuting wasn't really an option. It wasn't until I moved here to Seattle and got a job a little ways away from where I lived that I thought, man, walking takes so long, and the bus doesn't make it take much less time with the way it's routed. Maybe I'll just get a bike. I'll just bike there. And that's how it all began. Eventually, riding my bike became something that I really enjoyed doing and a way to get places fast. So that's two of the reasons why I found that a lot of people ride bike. One, well, here are four different reasons. A big one is environmental impact. When you're not using a vehicle, not putting emissions into the air, that's a big reason a lot of people think like, commuting might be a really good everyday alternative. A second one is incorporated fitness. I have to say that for me during this pandemic time, it's rough not having that active outside time be part of my every single day. I have to be now very deliberate about going outside and getting my exercise, whereas before my commute was, an hour and a half of active outside time every day that I didn't have to think about. The third one is, for me, it was fiscally responsible. I didn't have to pay for a bus. I didn't have to pay for a car. It just made sense. And the last one is, it's just fun. I could say that these first three are really huge, but to me, it was mostly just that I really enjoyed it. For me right now, also, it's a kind of a mental zen downtime of a spot that my body is all in motion. I'm getting my heart rate up, but my mind is nice and relaxed. And I really appreciate that about commuting. So today we're going to be going over how do you get into bike commuting? The three basic things that we're going to go over is selecting a bike and helmet that work well for you, planning your route, and with a bit of a knowledge of bike infrastructure. And the biggest thing is, what are some safe riding techniques when you're on the street or the trail? So first off, selecting a bike and helmet that's a good fit for you. Let me move this a little bit. So we'll go over this column first. So helmets essentially, and if you look at mine as well, it looks a lot like this picture. They're essentially made of a fancy styrofoam. I don't remember exactly what it is, but that's essentially what this business is right here. You'll see that I have two little dents in it, but it's essentially a fancy styrofoam. And for that reason, helmets are a one-time use object. You get one crash and then you should replace it, because that styrofoam material can absorb an impact really well once. After that, there's a lot of tiny little cracks in here that you might not even necessarily be able to see. And then you should get rid of your helmet. Same if it's like 3 to 5 years old. This is about 5 years old, so I'm going to replace it too. Sun damages it, sunscreen damages it. You might have had minor bumps with your helmet. Say if you dropped it, that after that many years, it's good to replace. Some folks think that is being overly cautious, but when it comes to, for me at least, if I ever need my helmet, I want it to work. So I would rather replace it. Also, many helmets come with a manufacture date inside on these stickers. And you can also tell that it's CPSC certified safe. All helmets that you buy on the shelves now, I think as of 2008, are certified CPSC safe, but they will also all have stickers on the inside. So really quick helmet check for us to do. And if you teach kids at all, this is a very easy thing, a very easy way for them to check their own helmets. It's called the 222 check. And all we need is our little fingers. So you go, get your 2 fingers, you go 2, there should be 2 fingers between your eyebrow and the bottom of your helmet. So it shouldn't be back like this, because you can see then you can land on your forehead and have some injuries. So you want to make sure it's nice and far down. After that, if it has a little roller in the back, you should tighten up that roller. Great, so you got that 2. Second 2, go on the side of your ears here. You'll see that my clasps are right underneath my ears. So keeping this strap tight keeps the front of your helmet forwards, and having it right below your ears keeps it from going too much side to side. So we have our 2, 2, and the last 2 is you should have 2 or less fingers between your helmet strap and your chin. And so they're up and down like this. You shouldn't be able to get 3 in there. Essentially, that's for if you fall, your helmet won't come all the way off. You want it to remain in place. And if it's too loose, it will come all the way off. If it's too tight, it's just uncomfortable and it doesn't help much. So once you make sure you have all those aspects good, I'm going to tighten it up a little bit. Great. What I usually do with kids is do the shake test too. Is it coming off? Is it moving around? No? Then it's going to protect you in a crash. So that's some basic helmet fit tips. As far as what kind of bike you want, it can really be anything. What I recommend for folks starting to ride and starting to commute for the first time is commute on whatever you got. Do you got a mountain bike? Great. Are you going to borrow a friend's city bike or road bike? Great. Once you start getting used to that bike, you'll see, oh, I want something that's a little lighter, or I want handlebars that help me sit up a little bit taller. You'll be able to see what you want. That being said, with these 3 different types of bikes, and these are general categories, mountain, city, road, you'll notice that there's difference in how wide the tires are, what your handlebar situation looks like, how high up you sit or how aggressive you sit facing forward. But all of them are kind of for different things. But to start out, use whatever you got. I'll take this time also to say that usually I'm in a live presentation, this is also where I go over an ABC quick check and a quick bike fit. These are also both videos that I've made to put on Cascade's YouTube. So if you just go to YouTube in Cascade Bicycle Club, you can look up ABC quick check and a quick bike fit. And the ABC quick check is a way to check over your bike to make sure all the components are working nicely before you go out on a ride. And a quick fit check is a way that you can hop on a friend's bike and see generally if it's going to be a good fit for you, at least for 20 miles. You'll want something a little bit more in depth if that's going to be your forever bike, but that's a great way for your first check off. So that's how to choose a bike that works well for you. Lights. So in Washington State, the law is that a bike must have a white light on the front, and we're talking at nighttime, sorry. At nighttime, a bike must have a white unblinking light on the front and a red reflector on the back. That is the least that you should have. The reason for the white unblinking light in the front is 1, blinking white lights are used a lot of time for emergency vehicles, so they don't want too many objects on the road to have white blinking lights. And also, when all you have is a blinking light, it's hard for folks to gauge how fast it's moving. So it's actually much safer for the white front light to not be blinking, to be a steady straight. As far as the rear reflector, it's great to have at least a reflector, but I would really recommend having a full light. The reason is the more light you're emitting and the more reflective apparel you have on, the more you're seen, which is always a wonderful thing. There we go. Here's two examples of lights. You can see that these lights on the front and back are really nice and bright. I'd say almost the brighter the better, as long as you're able to angle them down so they're not in people's faces. And here at the bottom, you'll see these are called polywogs. They're very cute, they're very small. They emit light, but they're not going to help you see where you're going. I include these because I carry them with me as just an extra set in case my main lights run out of battery, say if I'm going to be on a really long ride. Or I can keep them with me in case a friend doesn't have lights on them. They're really inexpensive. Again, they're not a super bright light, but at least they're something. Great, so we went over our helmets, checking our bikes, our lights, and we're all ready to ride. So now we're going to talk a little bit about bike infrastructure and planning your route. Here we have a picture of a multi-use trail. This one here is the Burke-Gilman Trail in Seattle. An important thing to notice about multi-use trails is that they're multi-use. That means that wheelchairs users can use them, bikes can use them, walkers, runners, families, kids, etc. So they're for a wide range of people. This also means that they're not a cycle track. You shouldn't go as fast as you possibly can on them because they're not just for bike riders. So you have to be really considerate of other trail users. Here are some examples of bike lanes. So here's a typical bike lane. And if you see this sign on a street without a bike lane, that's called a share road. What essentially that is just showing that bikes can be here as well. Vehicle users, watch out for bikes. But there's no delineation of just this spot is for bikes. The whole road is for bikes and car users. But if you have this white line here, that is a space that is just for bikers. We'll get into later that that's not necessarily even the safest place for you always to be. There can be cars parked in there, there can be car doors in there, but technically this is a space for bikers. The buffered bike lane, you see, just has that little bit of buffer. It's not even necessarily protected. That would be like the picture on the right where there's a physical barrier. Buffer just means that there's a little bit more space delineated by paint between the lane for cars and the lane for bikes. The two-way protected bike lane, you see that it's protected with that physical barrier and that it's its own kind of little road system for bikes. So you see that they're going north and south or whichever direction you're going. A good example of this is in downtown Seattle on 2nd Avenue. There's a two-way protected bike lane on the far left side of the road. Okay. Oh yeah, here's a Sharrow's example that I was talking about earlier. And that it could just be on the road and there's just a painted picture of a bike. Here with the green lanes, you'll see that sometimes there are green, the whole bike lane is green, or there's green that leads up to a bike box in front, which we'll talk about earlier. But this green specifically, most of the time, is showing where cars and bikes may be intersecting. So in this specific case, you see that cars can go over the bike lane here to turn right. That's entirely permissible, that's fine. But the green is giving people an added extra clue that, hey, something's happening. There might be crossover here. So you'll see this if there's going to be a right turn, you'll see this where there's driveways or pullouts, etc. Great. So now we're moving on to planning your route. Now we know a little bit about bike infrastructure. How do we actually plan it? So there's some great Seattle bike maps. They're usually put out, I think, about every 2 years. And you can contact Cascade Bicycle Club to get a copy. SDOT offers free copies. But these print ones are really great to have as a physical map. Another online tool that I really like to use, I'm gonna get out of here, it's just Google Maps. It sounds really simple, um, and it is, which is why I like it. There's some others, like specific ones, such as Regional Bike Network or Strava, but just as an intro, I'm gonna show you how to use Google Maps in a minute. So you'll see here, first we're gonna show you how to do it on a vehicle. In normal vehicle directions, I'm going from Golden Gardens to Cascade. You can go over here to the top left and just click bike, cycling, and it will show you some really good bike routes. Some cool things about this is, say on this route, this is following mostly the Burt Gilman Trail. If I go here down to the left, I'll be able to see the different elevation gains. So you'll at first think like, this looks like a very long route. Why is it taking me all the way around? One of the reasons might be that it's on more protected bike lanes or bike trails, like the Burt Gilman is. Another reason is if you look at this elevation gain, it's so nice and flat. Versus if I chose, this looks pretty nice and direct. I have some big hills to go up, and I might not necessarily be feeling that. So it's giving you some options there. Another cool thing to see, if you go to the top left, click on bicycling. Great. Now it will show you all the trails, dedicated lanes, bike-friendly roads. You'll see the legend down here at the bottom. And you can just follow them and then choose your own trail. Say you wanted to stop by a grocery store or what have you, that you'll see all the different local bike trails in your area. Something else cool that's happened recently, I'm gonna zoom in. These blue markings with the walking sign on them are for Stay Healthy Streets. Oh, see, it came up right there. Stay Healthy Streets. Streets limited to pedestrians, cyclists, and authorized vehicles. They're not for through traffic, especially during this time of a pandemic. They're so people can get out and walk and ride in the outdoors while still staying away from other people by staying physically distant. And some of these things, some of these Stay Healthy Streets are going to continue and become permanent after the pandemic, which is awesome. So let me get back to our presentation. Great. So that's one of the ways to plan your route, either by the bike map or by Google Maps or using some other bike-specific route planning tools. So we've gone over our bike fit, helmet fit, our lights, and then also some bike infrastructure and planning our routes. And the next thing is going to be trail and street riding techniques. Pardon me a second. Ooh, all this talking. So first we're going to go over some road riding guidelines. We're going to discuss where we want to ride, on the street, on the bike lane, etc. And signals for passing or lane changing. And then we'll do a couple of examples and we'll be done. So road riding guidelines. Well, let me back up. I'd like you to think for a minute and just answer to yourself if you have a driver's license, if you know how to drive a vehicle. I do, although I don't use it currently. But I ask that because if you have a driver's license or know how to drive a vehicle, then you already know all of the rules of the road for if you're riding your bike in it. The rules for biking on the streets are the same for the rules for vehicles on the street. So motor vehicle traffic laws apply to you. When you're biking in the street, you have to follow all the signs, the signals and markings. You ride in the same direction. The more you think about biking in the street as being the same as using a vehicle in the street, the safer everybody is going to be. Let me actually use this time to also say that bikes in most areas of Washington state are allowed to be on the sidewalks. I would not recommend it though, generally. I understand, especially if you're an educator for young kids, that they may want to start on the sidewalks, and I think that's okay. But there are things you need to be aware of. The biggest things are that sidewalks are made for people going walking speed. So if you're riding your bike walking speed, then it's fine. But most folks want to go a little bit faster. That's why I recommend being in the street. Sidewalks are designed for walking speed because there's tons of car pullouts, be it from driveways or intersections. There may be large cracks in the sidewalk. They're not very wide. There may be poles or maybe wires coming across. That said, there have been times that I ride on the sidewalk because of traffic issues, because of one-ways, etc. But I either get off and walk or I ride walking speed again. So for the rest of this time, we're going to be talking about how to ride in the street or in a bike lane versus on the sidewalk. So some examples of rules that you need to follow if you're riding in the street are yielding at crosswalks. This is just also like just a good thing to do for people is to yield at crosswalks. And if you're riding your bike, it's the legal thing that you must do. Roundabouts, always follow in the right direction, just like vehicle users do. That's one of the things that tenses me up the most. If I see bikes turning left instead of going right, because you're asking for trouble. SMART is a really good acronym to go over some of the basic bike techniques for riding the road. One of the biggest things is to stay alert. For me, this means don't get out your phone to look up directions. Don't be wearing headphones. I think headphones is a big thing for me because most of the information that I receive when I'm riding on the road is auditory. I know that a vehicle is behind me because I can hear it. I usually hear things happening behind me before I see it. So putting in a headphone and taking away that information that you have coming in, for me, doesn't make sense and it isn't very smart. M is maintain space. A big thing is just keeping your space in the road, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, why we may want to keep our own space, but as well as give walkers space, give other vehicles space. It gives everybody a little bit of wiggle room to make some mistakes or make some adjustments. You know, it's just courteous and kind for folks. Act safely and predictably. Predictably is key here. The more you can show people what you're doing, no matter what you're doing, the more you can show them so it's clear, the better. That means if you're swerving all around, people don't know what you're going to do. Everybody is nervous and tense in that situation. Versus if you're following a nice straight line, if you're showing them with signals where you're going, etc. Respect the rules of the road. We already went over that one. And think ahead and talk. I think folks underestimate that you can use verbal affirmations when you're riding, and we'll discuss this later with the signaling. But you can say turning right, you can say stopping, or in situations that cars can't see me, or I think that they don't see me and it's a sudden situation, that's why they have horns, you know, so they can say beep, beep, like I'm here. I sometimes do the same thing, making sure to not be, I'm not angry, I'm just letting them know that I'm there. I'm like, hey, 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 you know, just making some sort of noise. Don't be afraid to talk. So now we're getting into where's the safest place to ride if you don't have a bike lane. So now we're talking about just riding on the street. So I'd like you to look at these two pictures, and I'm going to give you 10 seconds to decide which one seems like the safer place to ride. Do we want to be riding far to the right, like these cyclists, or do we want to control the lane like this cyclist? I'll give you 10 seconds here. Oh, time's up probably. I think that a good thing to notice about these pictures is that they're different. So this is kind of a little bit of a trick question, I'm sorry. These situations are indeed different. So you'll notice on this left picture, there's no traffic oncoming. There's not many cars parked to the right. This street is really nice and wide. Versus here on this right picture, there's oncoming large traffic. There's cars all on the right side, and this isn't a very wide lane. So in both of these circumstances, I think they actually did the right thing. So the law states that you must ride as far right as is safe and practicable. That's the key there. Safe and practicable. So in this left picture, I prefer if this cyclist was a little bit farther away from this car, but we'll pretend that she is. They're riding nice and right because there's plenty of room for cars to pass here. They're not worried about cars on the right, so that's a good place for them to ride. Versus in this picture, this cyclist is giving themselves plenty of room away from those car doors, and by taking up the lane, they're signaling that they don't want any cars to pass. If they were to really be hugging the right, cars would be trying to pass and not leaving enough space for them. So these are the safest places for both of these folks to be riding. And you're legally allowed to take up the whole lane. The rules are the same though. If, say, you're riding nice and slow to be safe, that's totally fine. But if 3 or more cars pile up behind you, just like if you're a vehicle, then you should go off to the side of the road, let them pass before entering the road again. So you'll see ride as far to the right as is safe and practical. And where do I want to ride if there is a bike lane? The rule is also you do not legally need to stay in the bike lane. You can be on the road. So even if a bike lane exists, you do not have to be there. And here is why. Door zone, among other things. The bike lane isn't always a safe place to be. One of the big reasons is a lot of the ways that they're designed is right next to parked cars. So you're in the door zone. So in this sort of circumstance, when I'm riding, I ride right here almost on the edge of this white. That way, a door wouldn't hit me and I'm still a ways away from these vehicles. If I'm riding fast, though, for example, and I'm worried about these cars passing close to me and worried about the door zone, I'll go ahead and I'll take the full lane. That's totally within my legal rights as a cyclist. It is really the safest thing, not only for me, but for this vehicle, Nobody wants to get in an incident with someone riding a bike. Nobody does. So do the safe thing for everybody and take the lane when it feels comfortable for you. Another reason why bike lanes might not be safe is you see here you have broken glass, you have potholes, you could have wet grates, and all reasons why you'd want to get out of that bike lane. And see, you have here merging traffic. If I was riding quickly in the bike lane here and a car is looking to see if they can pull out, they have like 1 or 2 seconds to see me if I was riding fast in the bike lane. And oftentimes the vehicle user here is looking all the way to the street for cars and not necessarily for bikes. That's why if there's merging traffic and I'm going quickly, I'll often come out all the way into the street. That way they have, say, 3 or 4 or 5 seconds to see me before they come out. It gives them that much more time to see what I'm doing and to be aware of me. So this is another good, this is an example of a good bike lane that will show you when you're crossing over rails, always take a really nice 90-degree angle crossover, especially when they're wet. They're very slippery. It's very easy for your front tire to get stuck in those rails. So always cross at a 90. Sometimes bike lanes won't give you this nice 90 degrees like that. And so that's also a good time to ignore bike lanes and do what's safe for you and show everybody around you what you're doing. Hey, so now that we've gone over where we want to be riding in the street, and if we want to be using a bike lane, we're going to go over some basic hand signals and passing, and then we'll do a couple of examples. So for hand signals, think about it as your blinkers. As often as you use your blinkers, or say when you're stopping your car, your red rear lights go on, that's when you want to be using the stop. That's how often you should be using your hand signals if you can. I say if you can, because if it ever comes between you using your brakes and feeling safe and confident using your brakes versus giving a signal, use your brakes, always, hands down. You're never legally obligated to use your signals. It's just nice to give as much information as you can. So that being said, a left turn signal just looks like this. Sorry, it just looks like straight out. It's pretty intuitive that you're pointing, I want to go this way, so then you can go that way. The right hand signals, these are two different options that are both totally kosher. You can do that straight up, or you can do out that way. I use them for two different reasons. Say I want to use the one that's straight out because I'm in the middle lane and I want to get to the right lane. So that gives me a good chance to look over my shoulder at the car, make eye contact, and show them that I'm going there, for example. And the stopping signal is just that, stop. I'll often like wiggle my fingers or shake my hands when I'm doing these signals just for an added visual interest so people can see it. And like I said earlier too, don't be afraid of using your voice, especially with using that stop. I'll use that often when other cyclists are behind me and I'm stopping very quickly. I'll just say stopping, stopping, or left turn, right turn. Again, it's providing everyone around you with a little bit more information. Passing. So earlier we mentioned riding on trails, and this is a perfect time to get used to your passing. So whenever we're passing someone, especially on the trail, just give them as much room as possible. We want to show them that we're there and give them space to be kind and courteous. So this is a really great way to practice your passing, and I'd recommend you do all the steps all the time. I've seen a lot of close calls that have happened on the trail just due to people not using all these steps. So the first step in good passing is to scan. Just look behind you. Just like you would do if you're on the road in a vehicle, you look in your rear view mirrors first. Look behind you to see what's happening before you automatically decide to pass. So look behind you, see if there's a bike upcoming or a car upcoming. You assess, do I have time to pass or should I wait? Then you signal. I signal that I'm going left, I'm going to pass this person. I'm getting out of kind of my lane, even on the trail. I signal that I'm going left, and as I pass, I say on your left, or I'll say, good morning, I'm on your left, something to just be kind and courteous. And I know I get jumpy quickly, so it kind of having that gentle good morning instead of on your left, that can be a little scary for folks. So again, to go over it, you scan, you assess if there's time, you signal, and you say on your left. And oftentimes, if I'm going to be getting back in front of them, I do the same thing. I scan, did I get far enough ahead of them? I signal that I'm going to their right lane. I don't often say, but so scan, assess, signal, say. Practice that. Great. So here we're just going to go over a couple of examples of how to use these things in real life scenarios. So here's two options for turning left. You can do what you would do if you're using a vehicle, which is say I'm in the right lane, I want to get into the left. So I scan, I make eye contact with the driver if I have time. Well, I definitely make eye contact with the driver. I see if I have time, or if they see that I'm there, that I can get into that lane. Say they do, they wave me over, I come into the lane, I make a normal left turn. In this situation, you can also make a left turn if, say, it's really high traffic, you're not comfortable trying to get into the left lane or keeping up with traffic in that way. You can, when there's green light, of course, go straight, and then you make a little loopity and you set yourself up here. It's called a two-stage left turn. So then you set yourself up in the front of traffic so that you can go on straight. I'll show you in the next slide. Here's a really good example of a great place to set up. This is called a bike box, and you'll see that it's connected to this bike lane here. And so say you're riding this bike lane, you want to come all the way to the front to wait there. That's an entirely permissible place to be. It's the best place to be because you're more visible for cars. Don't feel bad about coming to the front and setting up your bike here. Sound good? Oh, yes. So this is called the right hook. Say you're passing by all these vehicles, you all have the green, you notice none of them have their blinkers on, and then at the last moment, this car comes and gives you a right hook. I'm going to give you 10 seconds again to think about how you can avoid this situation besides just trying to screech for a halt right before a collision happens. So I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. Great. So there are two big things that I would recommend. The first, I have a intersection like this on my daily commute. So I've learned over time. The first thing is, especially if traffic is moving quickly, way back here at the beginning, I would just come out into the road. I'd come out and take the lane, and that way no car can really turn right into me. Another option is pretend that there's a car behind this car here. I get right in the back of this tan car, so the car behind can see me. I make sure to make eye contact. They know I'm there, and I stay with them as we go through the intersection. So I don't try and race in front of other cars that may not see me. I stay with that car. That way, if this tan car in front of me turns, I'm far enough back that and I'm going slow enough that I have time to brake and wait, even if they've given me no signals, because sometimes that happens. Great. I hope that this was really helpful for you today. Now you know how to commute by bike because you know how to find a bike and a helmet that's the right fit. You know a little bit of what the bike infrastructure looks like and how to plan a route. And we went over a bunch of safe riding techniques. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about anything that I said or anything is confusing, feel free to email me at amyk@cascade.org. Again, my name is Amy. I'm the education coordinator at Cascade, and I hope to see you on the trails.